back again, and I'm really glad you're here. As we tackle the ACT reading, I want you to try to forget everything that you know and think about the reading that you do for school or on your own. This ACT reading is a new kind of reading, so erase everything else. We're going to strip it down to the most basic steps so that you can do well. You have to know what you're up against or it will make no sense to you. You never want to enter a situation, a school, a class, a team, a game, a party, without knowing what you're getting yourself into, right? So please, let's get this together now. Remember, you will need a printer for this section, paper and pencil. So if you don't have it, pause and go get it. Once you have it, you can restart, and here we go. You want to get your paper and you want to write. 1, 2, 3, 4. Pretty easy, right? I guarantee you this is not math. All right. The very first thing that you have to do is you have to learn the order of the sections that they give you. When you walk into the test, you need to know the order of the passages, what you will be reading, and what you want to do first and last. Here's what I mean by that. Okay, we all like different things. Usually, we like reading what we like, right? Of course. And we remember more and do better on things that we like. You might like some readings better than others. You may not have time for all 4 of these. So I want you to do what you like the best first. Now, you aren't going to know that Saturday morning when you're sitting there at 8:15. So you need to know that now. You can do them in whatever order you want. Now, you also have to figure out if you can get through all 4 in 35 minutes. Because if you can only get through 3, you need to leave time to guess on the 4th one, and you can still do very well. You are really going to be happy that you spent all this time doing it now, okay? You can do the passages out of order, that's fine. Just know what you're getting into so that you can do your personal best on this test. So, everybody, have you written 1, 2, 3, 4? Now, you need to put me on pause, and you need to get out the practice test that we put the link to at the beginning of your course. If you need the link again, we'll give it to you here on the screen. You need to print out the reading test, which we will begin from page 32 to 39. We're not going to actually do the test now, but we're going to talk about it. So do that, put me on pause if you need to, and when you're ready, we'll start it again, okay? All we're using it for is that you can see what I'm talking about, because you're going to do it on your own later. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 passages. If you choose to try to get all 4 done, then you will have about 9 minutes for each one to read and answer the questions. That means you're going to have to read the page of writing in about 4.5 minutes, and then you can spend about the same amount of time answering the 10 questions. So if you do all 4 passages, you'll need to get about 7 right on each one to get a 23 or 24 score on the reading section. If you do 3 passages, then you'll have to shoot for about 8 right, and then hope to pick up a question or 2 from just guessing on the 4th. Either way is fine. Hopefully, with the tricks that I teach you, you will be able to get a lot of questions right. Now, most students can read all 4 once they use my method and once they listen to what I say about it. The trick is to listen to what I teach you and to practice going this fast. You have no time to waste. You have to pay close attention to what you're doing. You can't float away. You can't leave me for a minute. You can't think about anything else but this. You have to feel like you're in the middle of some video game. You have to read every paragraph and say to yourself, what's going on there? Why is that in here? I mean, it's only 1 page long, right? So every paragraph has to have a purpose. And when you get to the questions, I'm going to teach you how to spot the easiest ones and to get them right off the bat, like getting the low-hanging fruit, getting it first. And the first thing I want you to realize is that it's an open book pop quiz. You don't have to close your book. You can search for the answers, and on the ACT, you can find almost everything you need, but you need to know how to find it. All right, I never want you to get bogged down on any one question. Just like we talked about in the English section, Grab the easy ones. If something seems too hard, put something down, circle it in your test booklet, and then bounce on to the next one. Okay? You should not be spending more than 30 seconds on any one question. If you are, you should be moving on. I know it seems fast, but that is plenty of time to read the answers. And if you don't remember, you can find the answer in the passage. That's what I'm all about, teaching you how to find those answers. We're going to talk more about that later. All right, why did I have you write 1, 2, 3, 4 on your paper? I'm not crazy yet. Number 1, the first passage. The first passage is a short story. I know they call it like literary narrative, and they have all these fancy words for it. All it really is a short story told by a narrator. Now, your job is to figure out who the narrator is. And I guarantee you, there will always be a question about who that narrator is. Who's telling the story? Now, this is a totally made-up story. It's not true. And there will always be a narrator. Sometimes the narrator's in the story himself or herself. Like maybe I'm telling you a story about how I grew up in Georgia. Sometimes they even know what everyone is thinking. I know that's weird. Like I'm talking about my family and I thought to myself, well, my son Max is thinking this, or my daughter Annie is thinking that, my daughter Cassidy's thinking this, my son Carson's thinking this. That's a special kind of narrator. It's not just a mom. It's called an omniscient narrator. Kind of like when you're in an Omnimax theater, it circles all around you and seems to get into your head. That's what an omniscient narrator is. They know what everyone's thinking. Another weird thing that the ACT does sometimes is to put these little asterisks like between paragraphs. That just means that they're changing the scenery, which is kind of weird, but that's what they do. And one other really weird thing that I've noticed that they've done, a paragraph will begin with a quotation mark, which tells you that someone's saying something, someone's talking away, and then you end the paragraph and there's no mark at the end of the paragraph to show you the quote ended. Then they start the next paragraph and it starts with a quote, and you're like, what just happened here? Well, it's the same person talking. Here's an example. Quote, I don't want you eating all that apple pie at one sitting. Your mom will be so mad at me if I let you spoil your dinner. I know that's what grandmothers are supposed to do, but man, your mom can get really angry sometimes. Do you hear me? Question mark, no end of quotation. Now here's the next paragraph. Quote, and honey, ... please put on a clean shirt before I drive you home. Your dad will think that I had you working in my yard all day if you show up all messy, period, end quote. Star, 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 asterisk, 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 asterisk. The story continues. Later that day, I arrived home hungry and clean. My parents were overjoyed as we pulled into the driveway. All right, so through this example, you've been able to see a few things that I've been talking about. The grandmother is talking in both paragraphs, the first paragraphs. Then those asterisks, those little stars show up, cluing us in that the scenery changed, okay? So job 1 on the first passage is to figure out who the narrator is. Job 2 is to figure out who the characters are and the link between the narrator and the characters. All right, do they like each other? Do they know each other well? Do they hate each other? Or are they ambivalent? Now, why is Mrs. Arch bringing up this big word? I'll tell you why. Because they use it on the ACT, all right? Just like an ambidextrous person can go right or left, maybe some good lacrosse players can shoot with their right, shoot with their left. Ambivalent can go either way. An ambidextrous person can usually write with both right hand and left hand. It means you're kind of on the fence. So as you read the short story, you can figure out who the narrators are, who the characters are, what happens between them, and how they feel about each other. Okay, let me give you some examples of typical types of short stories that I picked up from the last couple years of the ACT. There was one about an adult going home to her hometown after being gone for a long time. All right, lady was on a train back home. Another one was about a girl whose father had loved operas for his whole life. Oh my God, what would I do about that? Another one was about a girl and her kind of dislike, ambivalence about her piano teacher. And another one was about a Native American dancer who loved going on stage with her dance group. All right, got the picture? That's number 1. Now next to number 2. They call it social science. That's their word for it. I call it history, government, or people helping people. So put me on pause and write that down. History, government, people helping people. Okay, this one does not have a narrator. This one is true. It's going to be full of facts, figures, names, and dates. These are all fair game for what they will ask you about later. Now remember, they take these articles from longer ones and they have to make it fit on one page. So each and every paragraph is in there for a reason. And your job is to figure out why they left each and every paragraph in there. So usually the first sentence of every paragraph has the reason why they're going to write that paragraph. That is good writing, and they have to model it for you, right? So in school, hopefully you've learned, that's called a topic sentence. The rest of each paragraph usually provides the facts and the details that kind of back up that topic sentence. In fact, in passage 2, the most important parts are the first paragraph and the last paragraph. Okay, more about that later. Let me tell you some typical passage topics for passage 2. Here you go. Do people really know what the government does? Well, that's one for you. Another one. New rainforest businesses. Okay, here's another one. How did shipping change America? Get the picture? Great. Now let's talk about passage 3. Here comes the tricky one. I know they call it humanities, but of course, there's Mrs. Arts for you. I call it the arts. Not A-R-T-Z like my name, but A-R-T-S. That would mean music, drama, theater, dance, film, architecture. I happen to really like this section. I think it's super important. But then again, I like music, drama, theater, and dance, and film, and architecture. I call it the hybrid. And you guys all know what a hybrid car. It uses 2 different energy sources. Well, I call this the hybrid because it may be written like a story, so it may remind you of the first one. But it's true, and there's lots of facts like the second one. So the interesting thing is that you might get an idea about whether it's a story or not, but you'll have a little bit better idea about how much attention you have to pay to the narrator. But you will also figure out, after you deal with the narrator deal, that it's going to be true, and you need to look for topic sentences like those headlines that tell you what the paragraph's about, and then there are going to be a bunch of facts and details backing up that first sentence. Okay, so here's some typical subjects for the third one. Louis Armstrong and his influence on jazz. Yeah, I love jazz. I went to school in New Orleans, and I love it. Or here's another one. How a professional philosopher came to choose that career. I've wondered about that too. How do people wake up when they're 10 and they go, I'm going to be a philosopher? Kind of crazy. And there's another one. How film has changed with immigrant groups coming to America, what they brought to the mix. So I find that super interesting. All right, passage 4. This one they call natural science, but my name for it is pop science. It's kind of like something you'd read in Popular Science magazine, or if you had to bring a current event to science class. It's something that you would see on the Discovery Channel. The important thing about this one is that it's true. Each paragraph will have a topic sentence, and then, man oh man, they will be bombing facts at you, right and left, backing it up. But the interesting thing is they always pick a topic that hasn't been solved or resolved or settled. It's something still up for argument, okay? Like whether acupuncture really works or whether vitamin C works for colds. Usually it's the last paragraph that tells us why this whole thing is important. Now let me give you some examples of typical subjects. Traffic patterns and whether they're predictable. Satellites in space. All right, and whether they help or hurt us, what they are. Eels that are all from the Sargasso Sea, but no one's ever seen them there. How ant hills work. Okay, so you should be getting the idea. And now, after you think about it, and you think about my little examples, and study it a bit, you should be able to write down 1, 2, 3, 4, and you should be able to tell me or tell anyone that the first one is a short story, the second one is history or government, or people helping people. The third one is arts or humanities, and the fourth one is science. Okay, we're going to get very specific now about how to do this. But knowing the order of the sections is very, very important, because as I told you, you're going to have to know whether you want to do them in order, which is fine, or whether you want to swap them and do them in your order. Lesson 2, how to read for the ACT. All right, get out your paper again, and I want you to write a 1 and a 2, then draw a little line, and then write a 3. Okay, I'm going to pause a minute. Hopefully everyone can do that. And now I'm going to tell you more about this. Soon this will all make a lot of sense to you. All right, if you poke around and go slowly, you will never read this thing. You won't. You will run out of time, and that's all I hear from people. I ran out of time. So you have to stoke your engine, rev it up, and really get psyched to tackle this, or it's going to tackle you. I guarantee you. So let me see your muscles. Let me see you come with full force on this thing. Now that means a few things. It means when you read the first sentence of each paragraph, especially on the second one, third one, and fourth one, you got to really get into it, chew it, swallow it, digest it, and really understand it. Then, when you read the rest of the paragraph, whoosh, you need to go in high gear, okay? Now, most students always say to me, how am I going to remember every little detail? And I'm not mocking them. I'm just saying I hear it a lot. The answer is you're not. This is an open book pop quiz. Would you memorize everything if you could use your book and your notes? No. So what I have to teach you is how to mark up your test booklet so that you can find whatever you need for the questions. So after I tell you what number 1 and number 2 stand for, then you need, please put me on pause and write it all down. Are you ready? Get your pencils or pen ready. I have mine to remind you. Number 1. Circle important nouns. Now you know that means a person, a place, a thing, any number. That would mean a date or a ratio or a fraction. Those are all numbers. Theories, okay? Did you ever wonder why they named freeways for numbers? It's because numbers are easy to locate, to find, like the 305 or 85 or 95. We can quickly see those numbers. So if I once read a passage about dinosaurs, and I had circled 3 numbers in the story. 100 million, 2/3, which is a fraction, and I told you that's still a number, and 30. The story was about dinosaurs and their brain size, and they wanted to know the ratio of their brain weight to their body weight. Okay, I looked at those 3 numbers on my paper, and I realized it can't be 100 million. That's not a ratio. 30 was the number of species in a particular part of the world. So when they asked me that question, I knew exactly what the answer was. If they had asked me how many years they'd lived on Earth, man, that million number would have looked good, right? So you will know if you circle numbers the one to get. So even if you didn't remember 100 million, when you looked at the story, that would pop up on the page. If they had asked you about a ratio, when you found that 2/3, that would pop up on the page. So I think that's a really helpful thing to do. The same thing is circling people's names. If they ask you about Coco and you've circled Coco, you know. All right? Ready for number 2? Here we go. Put a star or an asterisk next to every list. Now, what is a list? A list is more than 2 things. The ACT loves to ask this question. Quote, all of the following are mentioned as reasons why she went to college, except. All right, so just like I had you do in the grammar section, you always want to circle except. But when you're reading the story, if you would put a star or an asterisk in the margin next to any list, then you could quickly grab it. So the story may say, quote, the hot dog stand had many condiments available for customers, such as ketchup, mustard, onions, and relish. And then the question will say something like this. Which of the following is not listed as a condiment available for the customers of the hot dog stand? And for those of you who don't know the word condiment, it means the stuff you add to your sandwich or whatever. Okay, A, ketchup, B, relish, C, mustard, D, salt. All right, you do not use your outside information on this or what you think. You go with what you read. So if you go from the question to the list, don't go from the list to the question. Stick to the question. You say ketchup, check. Relish, check. Mustard, check. The only thing that's not there is salt, so that's going to be your answer. Now, don't forget, just like I taught you in the grammar section, and I know I'm repeating myself, but I'm allowed to, you must circle, not, except, or least. I'll be very mad at you if you don't do that. That would just be so stupid. You're cruising along on the test, looking for the right answer, looking for the right answer. Then all of a sudden, you get one of these, and what they really want to know is the wrong answer. I mean, I see stars when people don't circle not accept or least. I really do. I go ballistic. My face turns red. Steam comes down my ears. No, I'm teasing. But I do get mad. So please don't disappoint me. And please circle not accept or least. Okay. They usually give you at least 4 of these on the reading test. So you could easily get all these right and improve your score without wasting a lot of your precious time. Okay, that's the best way to do those. All right, so now we understand why we have 1, 2, 3, 4, which is short story, history or government, humanities or arts, and science. And now we have 1 and 2. We know to circle nouns, people, places, things, theories, names, and numbers, and we know to star list. Now, number 3 is negotiable. The first 2 are non-negotiable. Number 3 is you. You're going to have to make that decision. Half my students like to do number 3, and the others do not. So this is up to you. Number 3 is underlining important sentences. So it's really easy. For passages 2, 3, and 4, it's probably going to be the first sentence of every paragraph because that's the way you're supposed to write. Okay? So you would probably read the first sentence, and remember I told you to pay real close attention to that first sentence and underline it. Okay? Now you're not going to have that in the first one because it's a story, but you will have something that I will say is an important realization. Okay, so Oprah Winfrey would call it an aha moment. Okay, now you can decide whether or not you want to underline these things or whether it slows you down. And the only way you're going to know that is to practice. So you say to me, well, this is your sneaky way of getting us to do that practice test. Well, yes, it is. You got me. All right. So you want to read the first sentence of every paragraph very, very carefully and then kind of zip through the rest. But you still have to circle and star because if you don't, you're not going to get it right. Okay, so we're going to practice a short story. But before we get started, we need to talk about 2 very, very important things. They are so important that you may want to listen to me say them twice. So, number 1, you want to circle the answers in your test booklet for one whole story. Then you want to move over to your answer sheet and bubble in the 10. This will help you focus more on getting more right, and it'll let you keep track of how many you've answered and how many you've circled because you want to bounce through them. Okay? I don't want you to do, if you choose to do 4 on this test, you don't want to do that on the 4th one because if you run out of time, you won't have time to transfer over the ones you've gotten right. So on that last one, I do want you to bubble them in just like you do every other section where you go 1 at a time. Okay, but the first 3, definitely circle them on your answer sheet. You can write as much as you want on your answer sheet, on your in your test booklet, and then transfer them over to your answer sheet. Okay, number 2. I know that a lot of people struggle with one type of reading other than the other. I know that because I've been doing this for so long. So you need to figure that out and make it your last one. They are not going from least difficult to most difficult. So you need to do the one last that you think is the hardest. And only by practicing or knowing yourself will you know what to do. So like I said, I like the stories. I would do 1 and 3 and then 2 and 4. If all of this is confusing to you, though, just do them in order. That's the last thing I want to do is confuse you. But typically, you can think about it a little bit now and know to do the one you hate the most last. Okay, now put me on pause and make sure that you print out the story that we're about to read together. If you haven't, put me on pause now and we'll talk about it in a second.